The Crow may look insignificant, but it is one of the most powerful Grim Reapers out there, resurrecting people who died tragic deaths and taking revenge on their wrongdoers. In today's video, we will be looking into the shocking story of Carrie, aka Curare, a little girl who was raped and murdered, and how after getting the supernatural powers of the Crow, she is connected to a retired police detective who was on her case, getting a last chance to avenge her death. This story is told over 3 issues. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you, and let's begin. The Crow Origins. If you're a fan of comic books with dark revenge plots, there is a good chance that you have come across the Crow series, which started as a way of expression from its creator James O'Barr after losing his fiancée in a drunk driving incident. Has become a critically acclaimed series of comic books, even having a film made on the pilot edition. We have made a few episodes in the past on the Crow's significance and its ever-important role in helping victims of wrongful deaths avenge them. This episode talks about the unfortunate story of the first child Crow, an innocent girl losing her life in a gruesome manner, something she'd never deserved, but gets the Crow's superpowers to punish her rapist. The Crows here are powerful birds, as are reincarnated souls of the victims. Both entities possess supernatural qualities that make them immune to pain and suffering, helping them accomplish their missions more efficiently. As the soul takes its revenge, it proceeds in peace to the afterlife, and the Crows search for more such disturbed souls. In the first issue, set in October 1978, Franklin Joseph Salk, aka Joe, is a retired cop who stays alone in his messy apartment. Disturbed by his cat, he wakes up from his couch and swears at the feline before giving him some food. Joe lives in a very disorganized fashion. An overflowing ashtray, a half-empty alcohol bottle, some scattered pizza boxes, and even a broken glass frame that holds his retirement certificate from the Detroit police. While he heads to the washroom to relieve himself, he has multiple thoughts in his head, a lot of self-loathing, how he misses his estranged family, and the mention of a dead girl, probably from a case close to him, leading to the turmoil in his life. As he comes out of the washroom and walks down the aisle, he is shocked to see the spirit of a little girl who entered through a window. The girl tells Joe, "Don't forget about me." Who is this spirit? Was she the dead girl Joe was thinking about? How are the two related? To answer these questions, let us go back 5 years to October 1973. Joe's turning point. It is an eerie, cold night, and Joe is at a crime scene somewhere in Detroit's outskirts, where the corpse of a young preteen girl who was brutalized and murdered has been found. Joe may seem like a tough guy on the outside who commands his juniors and shouts at them for their goof-ups, but on the inside, he is an anxious person who is quite disturbed by rising crimes against children, trying to steal up. However, when Joe takes a look at the girl, he breaks down internally on seeing the girl's wraithed face and open eyes, with flies hovering over her corpse. Even the toughest of people can break down upon seeing something like this. As it starts raining suddenly, any hope of genetic evidence is washed away, making the investigation harder. We see some vignettes of Joe's personal life, where he and his wife are shown drifting apart. He's also not close to his 2 daughters. At the breakfast table, Joe always spoke about brutal crimes he had investigated to his wife, which would turn her off. One day, while on duty, Joe visits a post-mortem theater where the girl's body is lying on a stretcher. The surgeon starts his investigation and is shocked to see that the girl has had her internal organs ruptured, along with signs of massive internal bleeding. He informs Joe of the same and adds that the girl tried hard to fight her rapist back, but was not successful. This information sickens Joe, who then prepares to rush out when he feels the girl calling his name. Immensely disturbed and weeping, Joe is unable to get a hold of his emotions and resorts to shooting a barrel in the alley to cope with his emotions. On seeing 2 people glaring at him, he shouts back at them to mind their own business, lying that the sound was of a car backfiring. Following this incident, Joe spends most of his time in his basement among photographic evidence of the girl's crime and at the taped-up scene in the hope of finding any more evidence. His behavior frustrates his family and they leave him. In the present day, as Joe stands bewildered looking at the girl's spirit, she extends a hand saying, "Let me help." While the titular Crow who resurrected abducted her hovers outside the window. The second issue, Tertiary Wounds, opens with an angry Joe who has waylaid the car of Chester Lipinski Jr., a criminal on parole, and is interrogating him about the girl's brutal assault and murder. Chester keeps claiming he's clean, but Joe is visibly enraged and in no mood to listen. He pulls out and reads aloud an old case sheet where Chester had allegedly raped and almost murdered a minor girl named Maria in the past, but had his charges narrowed down to aggravated assault thanks to his attorney. Joe proceeds to beat Chester up very badly and asks if he has anything to do with the murder in question. A bleeding Chester invokes God's name while claiming innocence, which angers Joe even more. With every passing moment, Joe's attacks on Chester becomes more violent and bloody. He asks Chester what he was doing on October 27th, the day the murder took place, to which Chester claims that he was watching TV at home. Joe pulls out a mask and some duct tape, which he found in Chester's trunk, and tells him that this set of articles in police vocabulary is called a rape kit, signifying that Chester would still have been committing such heinous crimes while out of prison. On glancing at the case sheet once again, Joe confirms that Chester's blood group was found nowhere on the girl's corpse. However, before leaving, he beats Chester up fatally for assaulting Maria, and he leaves. Joe is later seen working on a case in his office when his superior comes in and complains about him taking more than 2 weeks on the investigation. While flipping through the evidence, Joe discovers the girl's name, Carrie, sewn onto her undergarment in a photo. When he brings this to his superior's attention, the superior becomes angry and expresses dissatisfaction with the investigation's pace, hinting at reassigning the case. Already emotionally invested, Joe retorts rudely, daring his superior to take him off the investigation. Later, Joe is shown continuing his investigation from his basement while his daughters play and watch TV. The host on the program mentions a poison called Curare, which catches Joe's attention and becomes stuck in his mind. In a past scene before the murder, we can see the girl playing in a park on a swing with her soft toy bunny. A man sneaks up from behind and whisks her away forcefully. Notice the panels where the soft toy becomes sad, a grim and striking way of portraying the girl's fate. This man takes her away in a car and sets off for Detroit's outskirts. The girl, trapped in the car's seatbelt, requests that she be loosened, but her plea is ignored. She even asks if he's going to hurt her, but there's no reply. We later see that the man has a hefty body and a mustached face. He is also seen guzzling alcohol while driving. As they reach somewhere on the outskirts, the pedophile carries the girl under his arm and goes to a secluded spot to commit his crime. As dawn breaks, he proceeds towards his car but sees 2 cops standing around it. The cops, on seeing him approach his car, starts interrogating him. A glance inside his car shows the child's shoes buried under beer cans. In the present day, Joe breaks down on seeing the girl's spirit and apologizes while hugging her and bawling. The spirit comforts him and asks to be taken into the basement, where Joe kept his evidence. Joe asks if Carrie is her first or last name, and she replies that Joe can call her Curare. He yelled the word out in the basement on hearing his daughters chant it. She lets in the crow, which was hovering outside, and says that it would also help them in the investigation. Paved in skin, the last issue of this story starts with Joe, Curare, and the crow in the basement, where her photographs are plastered all over the walls. She exclaims to Joe that he must find her to be pretty, to which he gets emotional and replies positively. Curare asks Joe if he has a favorite picture of her among them, while the crow looks at one of the photographs of the crime scene. A short flashback of the pedophile plays out in the crow's mind, where he's seen performing some tests for the cops, after which they let him leave. Meanwhile, Joe glares in every photo trying to search for evidence again. While the crow calls him an idiot, Curare smiles and shows him her naked feet. It suddenly strikes Joe that her shoes were missing from the crime site. Joe immediately calls his senior and asks him about any cases that involved missing children's shoes, to which his senior says that they had picked up a person stealing children's shoes around a decade ago on charges of assaulting a minor. Joe requests that he looks for the suspect's name. The crow, meanwhile, calls to Curare, and she tells Joe to ask about the cops present at that night. On asking further, the senior mentions 2 names, one of whom died in the shooting, and the other, David Tashinsky, now a bladder cancer patient, is counting his final moments in Henry Ford Hospital. The 3 immediately rush to the hospital and find him on a bed in the ICU after a frantic search. When a furious Joe confronts a frail Tashinsky about the goof-up, he confesses that the pedophile told him that day that he was drunk and had gone up the hill to relieve himself. The cops at that time believed him, as there were alcohol bottles strewn around the area, and subjected him to a sobriety test, which he passed and then left. A week later, they found out that they had messed up really badly and were ashamed to bring this matter up. Tashinsky tells Joe the pedophile's name, Richard Harold Davis. Curare tells Joe to forgive Tashinsky, but Joe says that he will not. The Crow tells Tashinsky that they will meet soon as he nears his death. A pumped-up Joe calls his senior back, who confirms that the person in the older minor assault case was indeed Richard. We get to know that Richard lived with his mother until 1977 and shifted out after she died from slipping in her bathtub. The city had also seized her house due to pending taxes. As the three head to Richard's abandoned house, Curare tells Joe that he should have forgiven Tashinsky, to which he says he doesn't repent not forgiving him. Curare goes on to tell the story of her birth, which was in the same hospital they visited, where her mother hugged her one last time before committing suicide by jumping off the hospital's terrace. As they reach Richard's old house, the Crow signals that Tashinsky is no more. On entering the house, Joe and the Crow search for evidence. They discover an attic and are shocked to see it filled with skeletons of children and animals dressed in girls' clothes, decorated with makeup and kept in a group, probably for a photo. This confirms that Richard was indeed the perpetrator and has even abused and killed animals. While leaving, Joe finds some wide footsteps leading out from under the house. Having a hunch that something may be wrong, he slides under the house and finds mounds of dirt. While sifting through one of the mounds, Joe is shocked when he discovers the body of another child named Alice. Her name is written in her necklace, with her shoes missing. This strengthens his resolve to hunt Richard down. The three proceed to follow in those footsteps. Joe later tells Curare in passing that he should have forgiven Tashinsky. Curare replies that Alice's spirit has thanked him for discovering her body. They approach a barn less than a mile away from the old house. An unarmed Joe proceeds to enter the barn, and though initially reluctant, he allows the Crow and Curare to enter as they insist. What they see when they enter shocks them. Pornographic photos and magazines, a sex doll, and a trophy wall of Richard's victim's shoes, undergarments, and other accessories. Curare immediately recognizes her shoes and a sock hanging under a piece of paper with her name written on it. Her actual name is Carrie. Richard storms out of a portable toilet inside the barn and gets angry after seeing them. Curare confirms to Joe that Richard was the one who raped and murdered her, and she starts weeping after getting flashbacks of the dreadful incident. Richard and Joe engage in a bloody fight where Joe knocks out the pedophile's head with a sledgehammer. When Joe asks Curare if she wants him to kill Richard, she tells him to decapitate the rapist, gouge his eyes out, and give her the head. With this ordeal over, it's time for Curare and the Crow to leave. She thanks Joe for all the help, even on behalf of the other deceased girls' souls, and she says she loves him. As they are leaving, the Crow turns back, tells Joe to call his wife, and flies away. The story ends with Joe finally smiling and relieved. Marvelous verdict. Apart from being a fantastic storyteller, James O'Barr knows how to tug the emotional strings of his readers quite hard. Everything about the comics is shocking. The storyline is disturbing and the colors used are dull and cold to bring out the vibe of the setting, which may lead to you having a few sleepless nights. This comic may make you lose hope in the kind of society we live in throughout most of the story, but it rewards us with a feel-good factor in the end, where Joe is finally at peace after being able to crack this case. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Marvelous Videos. As always, if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.